Hello, and welcome back to part 3 of my continuing series on my stroke and stroke recovery. Today, we're talking to my occupational therapist, Laura. Laura, thank you so much for coming on to the show today.
You're so welcome. I'm happy to be here.
We're very happy to have you here. So we talked to Hallie earlier in this series, who was my physical therapist. You're my occupational therapist at this point when I'm at Chelsea Hospital. What is the difference between physical and occupational therapy? What does it mean to be an OT?
So in this context, occupation refers to the purposeful use of time, energy, and attention. So a lot of people hear occupational therapy and they think occupation, that is like what they do for a living. Yeah. But when we're talking about occupational therapy, we're talking about everything that you do all day that occupies you. So that on a very most basic sense is things like bathing yourself, dressing yourself, getting yourself to and from the toilet, feeding yourself. On a higher level, things like cooking and cleaning and managing a household. And on an even higher level are things like working and driving, managing schedules, managing medications. So the occupational therapist is concerned with occupation. The physical therapist, I don't know if Hallie mentioned this also, physical therapists are very much concerned with mobility. They also use as their tools something called physical agent modalities, which are things like force and electricity and temperature to help the person heal. The occupational therapist, we use occupation as our tools to help our patients get better. So
we're going to talk to you about electricity too, so don't you worry.
We use a little electricity too, us OTs.
You do. Yes, you're underselling it. Now, what led you to becoming an occupational therapist rather than a different form of therapy?
Right. Well, I actually, when I was in school to be an optometrist. And I sometimes joke that had I become an optometrist, I'd be making a lot more money than I am right now. But I literally got a pamphlet in my mailbox at Eastern Michigan, where I was going to school, and I was living in the dorm. And it was just sort of a promotional pamphlet for the occupational therapy program. It said, "Do you like people? Do you like to work with your hands? Check out the OT program." And I said, "I like people. I like to work with my hands." And I literally walked over to the building and sat down and talked to one of the advisors. And I was pretty much sold after he told me what OT was all about. It was really fascinating to me. So I sort of changed my major during school, and the rest is kind of history. And my husband often teases me that I didn't have to work at all in college because I just loved it so much. I just soaked everything up. And I did work in college. It was hard, but it was just one of those things where it was where I was supposed to be. And I'm so glad that this pamphlet arrived in my mailbox at the dorm, because it changed the course of my life, probably.
Read your pamphlets, folks. Yeah, no, I love that story. We talked about this when I was in therapy with you, and I thought that was fantastic. Now, Hallie did remind me that you were actually the first therapist I met with on day 1, and we were doing OT bathing dressing. Right. Does that opener role with patients come with any extra pressure? You ever worried about that? You're the first person I'm seeing, and what everybody has told me is going to be one of the hardest times in my life.
To be totally honest, it sometimes seems like us OTs get a free pass because we get to help folks take that first shower. And often folks, if they've been in the hospital for many days or many weeks, sometimes many months, that first shower is sort of like the most amazing, wonderful experience. And so, you know, even if they're in a really rough spot, because we're the OTs and we get to help with that first shower, people love OT. so it doesn't feel like a lot of pressure. It just, I'm usually really excited to get to meet with somebody and help them just get started back doing the normal things that a person does every day.
Oh, yeah. And then, folks, you can feel real grungy in a hospital bed for a week or two. Trust me.
Absolutely. And as much as they try to wipe you down and do the sponge bathing, it's not the same as letting some warm water run over your body. So
now, speaking of bathing dressing, which was when I first met you, that is by far one of the areas where I was at my most self-conscious, and I imagine others are as well. But you were very respectful and cognizant of that the whole time, which I appreciated quite a lot. Is that role, working with people showering, bathing, dressing, is that at all odd for you, or is that just what you signed up for? You're ready to go and happy to help?
It's pretty much, I think, what I signed up for. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years, so I've seen a lot of bodies. And what I tell people is, not only do I not judge people, but I am just constantly amazed and astounded at human bodies and how they can just keep going through such difficult physical and mental, stress, of all different shapes and sizes and abilities and ages. So it doesn't feel awkward for me. I completely get it that it may feel awkward for the person. But I think I've adapted some strategies to help folks feel, covered up, and to maintain their privacy a little bit.
I think you were great at it.
Oh, well, thank you.
It's very hard to be in a hospital because people are taking you to the bathroom. You're helping me with showers. We're doing dressing. We're doing all these various things. And I talk about it now because at some point it's like, this is just what we do. But certainly early on, day one, it's like, this isn't normal. I was sitting there in my house. I had a bad night, as I said in one of my videos in this series. And then all of a sudden, just an army of people are like, all right, now take your clothes off. And you just have to get used to that. So I really do appreciate that because you were always really cognizant of that, even though we had to get done what we had to get done.
Well, and talk about the ultimate lack or loss of control. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that people experience in the hospital is just the loss of control of even your own body. I mean, you've already experienced a loss of control in that your body isn't functioning the way it was before, but then to have your schedule determined for you, when you take your medication, when you eat, when you get up, when you lay down. I mean, it can be a really, really stressful time. And so the ability to help someone regain just a little bit of control is huge. So oh my gosh, I've only had a few very, very small experiences in the hospital myself, like having babies, that type of thing. So I've never been stuck in a hospital for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. And I can only imagine how difficult that is to just let complete strangers sort of take over your actual bodily functioning, everything about you.
Yeah, it can feel a little bit like a prison sentence for a moment there. And I really love Chelsea. I've told people that, but it's not my favorite living environment.
No, absolutely not. And that's why it's absolutely our goal to get you out of there as soon and as safely as we can.
Well, I really appreciate it. And I also spoke with Hallie about how motivating and useful it is for therapists to have those kinds of celebrations and positivity. And I was very much thinking while I was having that part of the conversation about you and celebrating everything from pulling up my pants to tying my shoes or anything in between. How do you remain so positive and energetic for your patients each and every day when that's so important to the recovery process?
Well, because I myself, I can really see the change literally from day to day. Just like when you have kids and you go see the grandparents and then a month later go see the grandparents again. And to you, the parents, it doesn't seem like the kids have changed that much, but to maybe the grandparents who haven't seen them for a month, there's this tremendous change. And I can see the change from day to day with folks in the hospital. And the patient themselves might not feel the change happening because it's happening gradually. But I would literally go away for the weekend, be gone over the weekend and be back on Monday and see a huge difference in you and the things that you were doing, or even just overnight. I saw changes. So it's really exciting to see someone do something as simple as pull up their pants. To folks that haven't been through this, it might not seem like a big deal, but it's a really big deal to be able to get yourself to and from the toilet. I mean, that's what I often tell people is imagine just not even being able to take yourself to the toilet. Imagine what a private, independent act that is. And to be able to go from needing total help with that to being able to be independent with that is something that literally opens up so much more opportunity for you to live independent and comfortably and in the way that you want to.
Oh yeah, it's a big quality of life improvement.
Oh yeah,
definitely. Now, we've talked about it a little bit already, but what are the goals after a stroke of occupational therapy, and why did it so often lead to me being electrocuted?
Well, the one of the main goals after a stroke is to be able to function on a very basic level as independently as possible. Like I said,
up now, yeah.
What's that? Oh, let me see that. Hey, that's all right. Wow.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
That arm and hand was nearly flaccid when you got there. It was
I called it an alien starfish.
That's right. It was, oh my God, that is so cool, Rick, to see that. It was just hanging at your side. It wasn't moving. It wasn't doing anything. That's so fantastic. So like I say, the overreaching goal is to be as independent as possible. If we can restore or help to restore actual movement and function in that limb that was paralyzed or weakened, that's fantastic. If we can't, then the hope is to try and teach you a way to compensate for it. So the electricity part that you were talking about was E-stim and electrical stimulation. And we do OTs and PTs, and in fact, sometimes speech therapists even use electrical stim to activate muscles, to start to bring some function back to muscles, some blood circulation, also to give the brain a little feedback that this limb is still in existence. And giving it a way to sort of reconnect with the limb that sort of was in a way disconnected from the part of the brain that makes it function. E-stim isn't the thing that helps everybody, but it can be really, really helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I joke about it, but I have found that my body is very responsive to the stimulation. So we're doing E-stim basically every day still, Laura.
That's
and
fantastic.
My OT in outpatient was very funny. We asked how long was too long to go, and she's like, well, how long are you doing the E-stim? I said, well, I go about 3 hours usually.
Okay.
When doing that. And she's like, oh, nobody's ever asked me this before. I have to look up some stuff. And it's like, she's fantastic, but she's like, well, I'm like, I want to fix these things. I want them to be better. And we've had a lot of luck, both with the fingers and the shoulder, doing E-stimulation on them. And so a regular part of my day now. But yeah, you don't quite fully ever get used to strapping pads on your muscles and then pushing the battery button up.
That's right.
So I did want to talk to people about that, because one of the things that happens to me in therapy, and this still happens in outpatient therapy as well, is I never know what the day is going to involve. And so I would meet with Laura and we would do picking up sponges or moving things on a big machine that would help my arm raise up, or she would put pads on me and we would practice electrocution to see what worked for my muscles and what didn't. And one of the things that really wound up being kind of wild to me is we would do E-stim therapy and it wouldn't feel like much of anything to me. And then like the next morning, I would have my hand be able to extend or my arm pick up a little bit more. And that was always so amazing. And I want people to know about that, because I had no idea that this was even something that we did medically, was put these little electro pads on people and then hook some wires up to them.
Well, and there are even there are garments now that are on the market that have electrodes built into them and little battery packs. So there's like sleeves that people can wear on their upper body, or sleeves for the lower body. So E-stim is a really big area that's changing and growing all the time. And I'm not at all an expert in it. I often have to go to my PT partners to ask for guidance on, how and where to apply the electrodes. And but it is a very, very interesting area, and one that I should probably spend a little more time learning about, so I can use it more.
Well, I think you were great at doing it, and I have absolutely no issue with you referencing other people's expertise on these things or otherwise. We were having these conversations when we were in therapy. I'm a lawyer. I believe fully in putting the knowledge base out there where you can find it, and then keeping it out there until you need it.
Exactly. At least knowing where to find the information. Yeah. Absolutely.
I wouldn't have any idea. So you help a lot of people at Chelsea. I'm sure you're helping people even now. What do you remember of me in my time there? What worked? What didn't? What did I do well? What did I do poorly? What could I have done better?
Oh gosh, Rick. Well, you know, I think early on, something that I said to you that I say to all of my patients that have any kind of neurological issue, because I went to a conference and I heard a neurologist say this once, which was that if you start with a good brain and you got a good family, you're going to have a good outcome. And it was pretty apparent right from the beginning that you had the good brain and the good family. I remember just leaving the very first time I met you and thinking, I got a really good feeling about this guy. I think he's going to do really well, even with the fact that your one arm and leg were nearly paralyzed. I mean, there was really not a lot of motion, you know, active motion happening in that side of your body. There was just something about you that said that you were really positive and motivated. And then, of course, Sharon was just like a force of nature there with you. And I knew that you were going to be okay. You know, I could just feel it. And to be totally honest, sometimes we have patients that we never see a family member, and they're really, understandably, you know, having a hard time being positive and motivated, and I don't get that good feeling from them. Like I don't have this sense that they're going to be okay. What could you have done better? Gosh, like I say, that's a really hard one. You know, early on, I mean, this stroke didn't just affect your arm and your leg. It affected your thinking to a certain extent. And there were a couple times where you just popped up out of your chair and I was like, whoa, Rick, sit down, slow down. And it was something we call impulsiveness, that, you know, where sort of sometimes after a brain injury or a stroke, sort of the filters get taken away, you know, and you just don't realize that you're doing something that might be unsafe, you know. I have
been told that my inhibitions have been reduced, so get excited, people.
And I don't know if you remember a couple times where I would like walk away and come back and you were standing up and I'm like, what are you doing? You're like, I'm standing up. Shouldn't I be standing up? And I'm like,
yep,
no.
There are a few of those where you try to guess what the therapist wants you to do.
Exactly.
And I stopped doing that because I was getting tackled and things, but yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I cannot think of anything that you could have done better or different. I mean, I think you did everything that you should have done, which was got up and got ready for therapy. I don't ever remember a time that you said, I'm just not into this today. I can't do it. I don't feel like it. And another thing that I tell people in therapy and rehab is that when you're in inpatient rehab, it's like a job. Like you have to get up and go to work every day. And that's, if a person can sort of get into that mindset and that rhythm, then they'll do really well. Because, and it's also hard after a brain injury or a stroke or any kind of neurological insult. It's hard to have that get up and go every morning because that's an actual function of your brain. And so if that part of your brain is impacted, the notion that you have to get up and start your day every day, whether you want to or not, is a really hard obstacle to overcome.
No, I can definitely feel that. And I've shared people an image of one of the schedules at Chelsea that was one of my days, and people have already commented on how much that seems to be, and it is. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of energy. I would go back after therapy into my bed and I would fall asleep. I mean, it was knocking me out cold.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's a lot of work.
Oh yeah, and when you're in the ICU or in the hospital before you get to rehab, you're probably not being very active, and then you land in inpatient rehab and you're doing 3 hours of therapy a day, and it's pretty rigorous, and people are often exhausted at the end of the day. But then, just like with any training schedule or work schedule, you slowly acclimate to that schedule and that level of activity, and it starts to become a normal schedule and a normal pace for your day. But it's
pretty normal. Although I think you guys always know how to increase the difficulty for whatever we're doing. And certainly in outpatient, it's like, you want me to do what now? I think I laughed at my OT for a moment on Friday of this last week when she asked me to do something. It was shuffling cards. And I was like, sure, absolutely. Right. And she's like, no, I mean it. It's like, really? Okay, we'll give that a run. And then I did it. But she's like, I knew you could do that. Why did you react that way? I was like, I don't know. I thought you were joking.
Wow.
Sometimes the therapists are a little sardonic, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and, you know, also just looking at just hands themselves. Our hands are such incredibly complex and fascinating machines that your therapist could see that your hands were changing, and your left hand was so much more able to do something as complex as shuffling cards. But because she's been watching you and watching how your hand is progressing and the things that it can do. And so she knew that it was possible for you to be able to shuffle cards, which is, if you've ever had any type of hand trouble or hemiplegia or hemiparesis, you would know that shuffling cards is nearly impossible.
Yeah, it was really, really hard for months for me, because you need this perfect amount of pressure on the bend.
That's right.
Really hard.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So
we did that this last week.
That's very cool.
And I was thinking of you because I knew we were going to talk. And I know that when I left you, we were just kind of getting into picking up sponges and getting me to drop them.
Yes, exactly.
You have to order your hand to release.
That's right.
And then we were dropping sponges, and we're up at shuffling cards now. So we're making our way.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that.
Gosh. Oh, thank you. Well, finally, and I really appreciate all the time you spent with me this morning, I wanted to thank you so much for everything you did for me, just for being you, all that positivity, putting up with me for so long. But as for one last question, how did you put up with all my nonsense for so long?
Rick, I am not kidding when I tell you that it was a pleasure and an honor to work with you. You kept me laughing. I'll tell you, that's probably the thing that just endeared me to you, is that you would just say the funniest things. And sometimes you were being funny, but sometimes you were actually being dead serious. But your way of looking at the world and approaching things was just so light. And I know that you didn't always feel light and happy and funny, but I think that's just your personality, that you have this really sometimes sarcastic, but not in a mean, biting way. Just this just really humorous, easygoing way about you that made it very, very easy to hang out with you. And I'm not kidding when I say it was truly a pleasure and an honor. And I never felt like, oh God, I got to go see Rick. I remember being like, like, I think I may have even said to you at some point, when you did something like put your shirt on by yourself, or, or walked with the walker to the bathroom rather than me bringing the rolling chair to you. I said, if I could do a cartwheel, I would do a cartwheel for you right now, because I'm so happy. It literally would just make my day to see you do something like that.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. It was great. And I can't wait to watch this series of videos. I had a really good time, watching your first one. It was fantastic.
Well, we're trying to get information out there, because this was certainly like nothing I had ever done before.
Oh, so. Absolutely. And, it's so great to put it on any kind of platform where you can reach more and more people, because stroke is, I believe, I don't know the statistic exactly, but I think it is one of the most prevalent disabling conditions that there is, which is why occupational therapists, that is the primary population of people that we work with, is people with stroke. Because like I say, it makes you sort of instantly disabled. And you can in fact recover from it, but at the moment that it happens, fast action needs to happen, and then the effects afterwards can be really devastating. So it's such an important thing for people to know how to recognize and how to react to.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sitting here 4 months on, and I think I have a pretty good prognosis and direction, but it was a couple of seconds, couple of minutes back in December, and 4 months later, we're still working on stuff. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
Virtual Legality is a YouTube video series with audio podcast versions presented as commentary and for education and entertainment purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice and does not create an attorney-client relationship. If you have legal questions about the topics discussed, please consult your own legal counsel.